take it now. Got 2 bullets in it. Doggo!
Mr. Arthur?
Hold on, miss.
The sun blazes down on the Wild West as Buster Scruggs rides along, strumming his guitar and singing happily. He looks like the nicest cowboy around, but don't be fooled. He's actually the fastest and deadliest gunslinger out there, with a hefty bounty on his head. During his journey, he stops by a small, dusty cantina, hoping for a drink. But there's a catch. The bartender refuses to serve him whiskey since it's banned, only offering it to known outlaws. Buster insists he's as much an outlaw as anyone else, but his neat clothes and cheerful attitude make it hard to believe. One cowboy gets especially worked up and tries to fight him. That turns out to be a huge mistake. Buster's quick draw puts everyone in the room down before they even know what's happening. He keeps traveling until he reaches a town called Frenchman's Gulch, a place he's never been before. His first stop is the saloon, where he has to leave his guns at the door due to their strict no-weapons rule. He joins a poker game at a nearby table, but there's a catch. He has to take over the hand left by a player who just walked away. When he looks at his cards, he realizes why. The guy left behind the infamous dead man's hand. Buster refuses to play it, angering the other players, especially a tough-looking guy named Joe. Joe doesn't think rules apply to him and pulls out a hidden gun to threaten Buster. But Buster, always one step ahead, kicks a loose board from the table, causing Joe's gun to turn back on him. One accidental shot later, and Joe is dead. The saloon goes silent, tension thick in the air. To lighten the mood, Buster starts singing a song about Joe, and before long, the whole crowd is joining in. But the fun doesn't last. Joe's brother storms in, furious, and demands a duel. Always up for a challenge, Buster confidently takes him on. To show off, he shoots the man's fingers off one by one before finishing him off while looking in a mirror. Feeling unbeatable, Buster's on top of the world, until another gunslinger rolls into town. This time, it's a young hotshot called the Kid, and he's got a reputation. He challenges Buster to a duel, and this time, Buster's luck runs out. The Kid is even faster, and Buster takes a fatal hit. As he drifts away into the afterlife, he accepts that his time was up. Nobody stays on top forever. In true Buster fashion, he even sings along to the Kid's victory song as he fades away. Meanwhile, over in New Mexico, a young cowboy comes across an isolated bank and decides it's the perfect place to rob. He bursts in gun in hand, demanding money. The teller acts all cooperative, reaching for the cash. But the guy's got a trick up his sleeve. Instead of handing over the money, he grabs a hidden shotgun and starts firing. The cowboy dodges the shots, grabs what little cash he can, and bolts outside, only to get shot at again. Turns out, the teller has covered himself in pots and pans, turning himself into a human shield. The cowboy doesn't stand a chance. Before he can react, the teller knocks him out cold. When he comes to, he's tied to a tree, his hands bound to his horse's saddle. A posse has already decided he's guilty and sentenced him to death. Just as he's about to say his last words, a group of Comanche warriors ambushes the posse, wiping them out. But they don't bother with the cowboy. Instead, they leave him dangling on his horse, figuring he'll suffer longer that way. Hours pass as he struggles to keep the horse steady, knowing that one wrong move could end it all. Finally, luck is on his side. A passing drover spots him and shoots the rope, setting him free. But his luck runs out again just as fast. The drover turns out to be a rustler, and soon enough, another posse arrives. The rustler takes off, leaving the cowboy behind to get arrested again. This time, there's no escape. He's quickly found guilty, and before long, he's standing at the gallows. With no way out, he focuses on a beautiful woman in the crowd, choosing to make her face the last thing he sees before the noose tightens around his neck. Elsewhere, an aging impresario roams from town to town with a young man named Harrison. Harrison has no arms or legs, but he's got an incredible voice, performing classic monologues from Shakespeare and Lincoln. Every time they stop in a new town, Harrison takes the stage, and the impresario collects money from the audience. The old man takes care of feeding, dressing, and handling everything else for Harrison. But over time, he grows tired of the whole setup. One night, they arrive at a town where nobody's interested in their show. Instead, everyone's gathered around something new, a chicken that can do simple math by pecking at numbers. The impresario sees an opportunity. He buys the chicken and starts treating it like his new star attraction. Harrison starts to realize what this means for him. The next day, they stop at a bridge over a deep river. The The impresario tosses a rock into the water, checking the depth. Moments later, he's back on the road, but this time, only the chicken is with him. Harrison is nowhere in sight. Out in the mountains, an old prospector arrives at a river, searching for gold. He carefully pans the water, finding tiny flakes. By counting how much he gets each time, he follows the trail, convinced he's close to a big strike. The old guy sets up camp by the river, getting by on fish and swiping eggs from bird nests. He spends days digging little holes until he figures out exactly where the gold is hiding. Then he starts digging deep. His guess was spot on, and he finally unearths a huge gold vein, something that'll set him up for life. But before he can even enjoy the moment, a young guy who'd been following him shows up and shoots him. Thinking he's got the job done, the young man lights up a cigarette and hops into the hole to move the body. Big mistake. Turns out the old prospector was only playing dead. He springs back to life, wrestles for control of the gun, and takes out the younger guy. Checking himself over, he sees the bullet went clean through without doing any major damage. After patching himself up, he finishes mining his gold, buries the would-be thief in the hole, and rides off with his newfound riches. Meanwhile, over on the Oregon Trail, siblings Alice and Gilbert are traveling with a wagon train, hoping for a fresh start. Gilbert isn't much of a businessman, but he insists he's arranged for Alice to marry a business partner once they reach Oregon. Tagging along with them is Gilbert's dog, President Pierce, who drives the other travelers nuts with his nonstop barking. Not long into the journey, Gilbert is hit with a nasty coughing fit and dies, probably cholera. With nowhere else to go, Alice chooses to stay with the wagon train. Billy and Arthur, two of the leaders, help her bury Gilbert and ask what she plans to do next. The next morning, Alice gets another dose of bad news. The boy Gilbert hired to drive their wagon claims he was promised a ridiculous $400 wage, with half due at the halfway point. Problem is, Alice has no cash, and whatever money Gilbert had was buried with him. Alice asks Billy and Arthur for advice, and they both agree that the amount is way too high. Billy even suggests the boy might be lying, so they decide to put off paying him and see how things play out. Meanwhile, since President Pierce is still causing trouble and Alice doesn't really want to deal with him, Arthur helps her scare the dog off by firing a shot into the air. As the journey continues, Alice and Billy spend more time together and realize they see eye to eye on a lot of things. When they hit the halfway point, Billy tries to talk sense into the hired boy about his supposed pay, but it doesn't work. So, Billy comes up with a different plan. He asks Alice to marry him. That way, he can take on Gilbert's debt, and they can build a new life together. Alice is caught off guard, but she's grown fond of Billy too and agrees. A few days later, Arthur notices fresh tracks in the area and goes to check on the travelers, only to find that Alice has wandered off. She'd heard President Pierce barking and went to watch him chase prairie dogs, not realizing how far she'd strayed. Arthur finds her and hurries to bring her back, but before they can make it, a group of Native American warriors ambushes them. Arthur hands Alice a gun and warns her that if things go south, she should use it on herself rather than be captured. He fights off most of the attackers with precise shots, but just as he thinks the danger is past, one last warrior sneaks up on him and knocks him down. Arthur plays dead until the attacker gets close, then takes him out with a final shot. But when he rushes back to Alice, he finds out she thought he had died, and she followed his advice, taking her own life. Heartbroken, Arthur covers her body with his coat and makes his way back to the wagon train with President Pierce, unsure of how he'll break the news to Billy. Elsewhere, on a different road, 5 strangers are packed into a stagecoach bound for Fort Morgan. One of them, Thigpen, won't stop singing, which is getting on everyone's nerves. Eventually, he and his partner Clarence hint at some mysterious cargo they're transporting, but they don't say much. As the trip goes on, the passengers get into a conversation about human nature. A fur trapper shares a story about a relationship he once had with a woman who didn't speak his language, arguing that people are basically all the same deep down. This offends Lady Betjeman, a strict Christian who insists the world is divided into good people and sinners. The debate heats up with Frenchman René also joining in, but Thigpen and Clarence mostly sit back and enjoy the drama. When René questions Lady Betjeman's loyalty to her husband, she gets so upset that she nearly has a breakdown. He tries to get the driver to stop the coach, but Thigpen casually informs him that company policy doesn't allow for stops. To ease the tension, Clarence starts singing a melancholic tune, which soothes Lady Betjeman but makes Thigpen tear up. The fur trapper, growing suspicious, finally asks what exactly Thigpen and Clarence do for a living. That's when Thigpen reveals they're bounty hunters. Their method is simple: Thigpen distracts their targets with conversation, while Clarence takes them out quickly and efficiently. Thigpen even admits he enjoys watching people die, finding something beautiful in their last expressions. This revelation leaves the other passengers deeply unsettled, making them dread what awaits at their destination. When the stagecoach finally reaches Fort Morgan, Thigpen and Clarence grab their cargo, revealed to be a corpse, and head into the hotel. The remaining 3 passengers hesitate before following, and Renee, realizing they may have just walked into a trap, nervously closes the door behind them. If you like this story, don't be shy. Hit that like button. And if you didn't, well, hit the dislike button twice just to be sure. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.